wooden box that had been stored in the cupboard for a long time. He did it carefully, as if he was worried that the items inside would be damaged just by the touch of his hands. From inside the box, he took out a small frame containing it, painting of himself. A faint smile suddenly appeared on Ling's lips, without him realizing it when his eyes fell on the figure in the painting. The figure of himself several years ago, when Ling was lost in memories. The sound of a car engine from downstairs caught his attention. Quickly, he put the frame on the small table beside his bed. Slowly, he walked closer to his bedroom window and peeked through the gap in the curtains. Outside, a very familiar car stopped right in front of the house. The car belongs to Orm. Without thinking, Ling immediately left his room. His feet stepped quickly down the stairs, his steps echoing along the quiet hallway of the house. Just as he reached the bottom floor, the main door opened and Orm's figure appeared, bringing with him the cheerful energy that always accompanied him. "Good morning, Peeling," said Orm in a cheerful tone, as usual. "Good morning," Ling answered, his smile wide, his eyes never leaving Orm, who looked excited. He then noticed the plastic bag Orm was carrying in his right hand. "What did you bring?" he asked, curious, while following Orm, who walked towards the kitchen. "Breakfast for Peeling his favorite regular menu," Orm answered as he put the plastic bag on the kitchen table. Ling frowned. "Huh? Why buy breakfast outside? You didn't cook today?" Orm smiled slightly, looking at Ling while taking out food from the bag. "Didn't Fi say that my cooking wasn't good and that Fi was bored? So I think from now on I'll go back to buying Peeling as favorite food." Ling looked at Orm with a confused expression. "Did I ever say that?" Orm just stared at him, silent for a moment before answering. "Fi said that 2 days ago," he said briefly while busy preparing plates and spoons. Ling scratched the back of his neck, which wasn't actually itchy, a little awkwardly. I don't remember ever saying that," he answered while pretending to forget. "Actually, I'd rather you keep cooking for me. I'm getting bored of eating the same thing every day." Orm turned his head, looking at Ling with slightly sneering eyes, but his voice remained gentle. "How strange," he muttered softly. He knew Ling often changed his words, and this time was no different. Ling just smiled a little, didn't reply. He propped his chin with both hands, quietly watching Orm, who was busy in the kitchen. Orm's face is very different now compared to before. Ling still didn't finish. Think about the fact that the geeky girl who used to be his roommate, now standing in front of him as a mature and confident figure. Suddenly, Orm noticed Ling's unblinking gaze towards him. He turned his head and asked in a slightly surprised tone, "Is there something wrong with my appearance, Fi?" Ling gasped, immediately blinking quickly. "Huh? No, there's nothing wrong," he answered hastily. "I was just staring at the food you prepared. My stomach is hungry," he said, looking for an excuse. Orm smiled faintly, as if he understood but didn't want to prolong the problem. "Maybe it was just my feeling when Peeling was looking at me," he muttered. Not long after, Orm placed a plate of food in front of Ling, complete with a drink. "Enjoy your appetite, Peeling," he said softly. "Aren't you eating too?" Ling asked while looking at the only portion on the table. Orm shook his head with a smile. "I already ate before coming here, so Peeling should eat." Ling looked at the plate, then took the spoon. Occasionally between bites, he glanced at Orm, who was busy taking care of something in the kitchen. The clock showed 5 in the afternoon. The atmosphere at the Siam Paragon Mall is getting busier, especially in front of the Prada shop, which is holding an event to launch their newest bag. The crowd of visitors is getting denser, filling the luxuriously arranged area. Photographers, journalists and fans tried to photograph the celebrities who attended the event. Among the guests who came, Lingling, a rising actress, attracted the attention of many people. With her graceful style, she walked into the Prada store, wearing a simple but elegant black dress that made her look classy. However, his steps suddenly stopped when his gaze fell on the figure standing in front of him. "Long time no see, Lingling," said a woman wearing a striking red dress, her hair neatly styled and a sweet smile on her face. Ling smiled faintly, but the smile did not show any warmth. "It's been a long time since I saw you." "Kenying," Ling replied in a low and even voice, holding back feelings that had been hidden for a long time. The woman in front of him was Ying, Anada Prokopkit, a friend from college who is now only a memory of the past. Their friendship crumbles along with inevitable competition, especially when they both enter various beauty pageants. In the past, Ying and Ling always competed fiercely to get first place. However, fate took them on different paths. Ying chose to become a professional model, while Ling succeeded in pursuing a career as a famous actress. Even though many years had passed, Ling still harbored resentment in his heart. Memories of the incident that changed his life came back to him. In the past, Ying once accidentally pushed Ling down the stairs, breaking her leg and burying her dream of attending an important audition. The physical pain may have disappeared, but the emotional pain is still there. "Let's go, Orm," said Ling without looking away from Ying. Orm, who had also been silently watching the unexpected meeting, quickly snapped out of his thoughts. He nodded obediently, even though his eyes were briefly focused on Ying. Remembering their past on campus, Ying had been a pretty good senior in the economics faculty and often helped Orm. This meeting certainly surprised him. "Yes, peeling," Orm answered as he followed Ling's steps towards the seat reserved for VIP guests. Just as they sat down, Orm suddenly felt something uncomfortable in his stomach. He approached Ling and whispered, "Peeling, can I go to the bathroom for a moment?" "It won't take long, only about 10 minutes." Ling stared at Orm for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, but not more than 10 minutes. Orm smiled in relief and immediately ran towards the bathroom. After a few minutes inside, he washed his hands in the sink, trying to tidy up his appearance. That's when a soft voice sounded behind him. "How are you, Norm?" Orm looked up and saw Ying's reflection in the mirror. An awkward feeling immediately came over him, but he tried to remain calm. "I'm good, Ping," he answered with a friendly smile. Even though there was a hint of awkwardness left over from the previous meeting, Ying approached, standing next to Orm while washing his hands. "Nice to see you again, Norm. It feels like we haven't seen each other in over a year. I've lost touch with you." Orm nodded. "That's right, Ping. I'm also happy to see you again. Ping must be very busy lately. Are you working with Lingling now?" Ying asked, looking at Orm with interest. "Yes, but I'm still on probation as his assistant," Orm answered politely. Ying nodded slowly, then smiled slightly. "If I still had your contacts, maybe you would be my personal assistant by now." He chuckled, then took out her cell phone from her small bag. "Can I have your line contact again? I promise I won't lose it this time." Orm hesitated for a moment, but then smiled and accepted Ying's cell phone. After entering his line ID, he returned it. "That's it, Ping." Ying smiled with satisfaction. "Thank you, Norm. I'll contact you later. Maybe we can arrange a time to meet and hang out." "Sure, Ping," Orm answered, remembering how they used to hang out with friends. Ying patted Orm's shoulder lightly before walking away. "I have to get back to the event. See you later." Orm nodded, then watched Ying leave before he himself returned to Ling's place to carry out his duties as an on-call assistant. "Let's go home," Orm exclaimed excitedly, his smile wide and his eyes sparkling as he watched Ling finish his work for the day. Today was indeed a long day for them. Orm has accompanied Ling from shooting for Kez magazine to attending the launch of Prada's latest bag collection. Even though he was tired, Orm's spirit was not visible, never receded. However, Ling's response surprised Orm. "I don't think I want to go home yet," said Ling. Looking for a moment at the night sky outside the window, Orm stopped in his tracks, his brow furrowed at the words. "Ling, why?" he asked in surprise. "Does Peeling want to go somewhere before going home?" There was a hint of curiosity in his voice, because usually after a long event like this, Ling always wanted to go home quickly to rest. Ling smiled faintly, turning towards Orm before replying, "Yes, I am. Want to go for a walk at the edge of the park before going home?" His eyes, exuding a desire to find calm in the middle of a silent night. "But it's 9 o'clock at night, Peeling," Orm replied in a tone. "Worry. The park definitely isn't too busy. Isn't that dangerous?" Orm looked at Ling worriedly, thinking about the possibilities that could happen in the night. However, Ling just took a deep breath, as if he wanted to let go of all the fatigue that had accumulated during the day. "Precisely because the atmosphere is not crowded, I want to go there," he answered softly. "I'm tired of dealing with crowds and cameras all day. A quiet park would be much more enjoyable." Ling stared at Orm for a moment, his eyes calm but full. "Please, are you tired? If so, you can go home first. I can go alone." Hearing that, Orm immediately shook his head firmly. "That's not possible," he exclaimed in a firmer tone, his eyes staring at Ling with determination. "I have to accompany Peeling. What if there are people who bother me? I will protect Peeling from all of them," Orm added while practicing boxing movements, as if ready to fight anyone who dared to bother Ling. Ling chuckled at Orm's funny behavior, even though it was clear that Orm's intentions were sincere to protect her. "You're so cute," Ling said softly, a smile still on his face. "Okay, then, let's go to the park for a while, just for a walk. It won't be long." Orm nodded, relieved that he didn't have to let Ling go alone. "Okay, Peeling, let's go before it gets late." With calm steps, the two of them walked out into the park near the CH3 building. The evening streets were starting to become quiet, the city lights illuminating the sidewalks with a soft yellowish light. The atmosphere that night was peaceful. The breeze blew gently, adding comfort after a busy day. Ling and Orm walked side by side, quietly enjoying the tranquility, which was rare after a day surrounded by people and cameras who kept watching Ling's every move. "Does Peeling feel better now?" Orm asked suddenly, breaking the peaceful silence. Ling turned his head, then nodded with a smile. "Yes, much better. Thank you for accompanying me, Orm." Orm smiled, feeling happy that his efforts were not in vain. "Of course, Peeling. I will always be there to accompany and look after Peeling at any time," he answered sincerely. Ling slowed his pace, leaving Orm slightly behind. The cool night air felt light on his skin, while his mind drifted to something he had kept for a long time. In a low but clear voice, Ling finally opened the conversation. "Thanks for the painting, Norm." Orm's steps stopped suddenly. He was surprised to hear Ling's words, as if those words awakened memories he once thought had been buried deep. Slowly, Orm turned around, his face showing confusion as he looked at Ling, who was now standing not far from him. "Hell, painting?" Orm asked, his voice sounding hesitant, as if unsure of what he had just heard. Ling continued his steps, this time closer to Orm. "I haven't had time to say thank you for the painting you gave me just yet," Ling said with a small smile hanging on his lips, his gaze soft and warm. Orm fell silent, unable to find the words. That memory, the memory of when he gave the small painting to Ling several years ago, suddenly came back clearly to his mind. "I remember that you were the little girl who used to share a room with me," Ling continued, her smile getting wider when she saw Orm's face, which now looked confused and nervous. Orm's face, which was full of energy and confidence, now looked different, like the shy girl he had known years ago. How can I remember it again? Orm asked in a voice, was shaking slightly, clearly showing his nervousness. Ling had never mentioned the painting before, and now, after so long, the topic suddenly came to the fore. Ling took a deep breath before answering, I just found out from my friend. Sorry, I realized too late that you were the old Orm. There was regret behind his voice, as if Ling felt guilty for not realizing sooner. Orm quickly shook his head, trying to calm Ling down. No need to apologize, Phi. That was for years ago, so it's natural that Phi forgot. Orm answered with a small smile, trying to relieve the tension in their conversation. Ling looked at Orm intently, and then, in a low tone, he said, But you never forgot about me. Orm smiled, although a little awkwardly. Phi is my senior, an artist who always appears on TV, so of course I always remember Phi. Orm replied, trying to hide his returning nervousness. Ling nodded slowly, but there was still one question that had been spinning in her mind. Regarding the painting, why don't you give it to me directly on my last day at the boarding house? Ling asked, looking at Orm with genuine curiosity. The question made Orm stutter a little. He bit his lips, seeming to be thinking about how to answer about that. I'm too embarrassed to give it to Peeling directly, said Orm finally, his voice a little low. Moreover, my gift is just an ordinary painting. I'm afraid Peeling won't like it or even throw it away. Hearing that answer, Ling drew herself closer to Orm, looking at him with great warmth. Even though it looks ordinary, I like that painting, Ling said sincerely. That's why I keep it. Orm lowered his head, trying to hide the smile that appeared on his face. Thank goodness Peeling likes it, he said softly, almost a whisper. Ling looked at Orm, who was still looking down, and, without realizing it, he bent his body slightly to match Orm's height. His hands reached out, gently touching the top of Orm's head. The shy girl I used to know has now turned into a full-grown woman. Cheer up, said Ling while gently stroking Orm's hair. Her gaze never left Orm's face, full of admiration. Orm's heartbeat suddenly beat faster than usual. He felt nervous, unlike usual when interacting with Ling. They were only a few inches apart, so Orm could feel Ling's warm breath touching his face. His gaze tried to avoid direct eye contact, but his body felt as if it was rooted to the spot. Orm cleared his throat softly, trying to get rid of the nervousness that was haunting him. Quickly, he pulled his body away from Ling, giving himself some distance. Of course, I don't want to be a shy person forever, Orm answered enthusiastically, trying to return to his cheerful, energetic self. Ling chuckled at Orm's reaction. Yes, your energy now seems endless. Sometimes it amazes me, he said, still smiling. Because here I am, Orm Kornnaphat, Orm answered confidently, smiling broadly. He then stepped ahead of Ling, walking quickly as if trying to escape his nervousness. However, behind his fast steps, Orm felt his heartbeat still beating loudly in his chest. He put his hand on his chest, trying to calm himself. Ling saw Orm starting to walk away and quickly called out to him, Orm, wait, he exclaimed as he quickened his footsteps, following Orm from behind. The quiet morning in Bangkok seemed different to Orm. Instead of enjoying the peaceful morning atmosphere, he had been busy since early morning at Ling's house, specifically in the kitchen. The morning sun provided soft rays coming in through the kitchen window, as if encouraging Orm to prepare this breakfast. Orm opened the refrigerator door and began to take out the food ingredients that had been prepared one by one. Eggs, flour, milk, and several other kitchen spices are placed neatly on the kitchen table. Next to him, A frying pan sat ready on the stove, waiting to be used. "Let's get started," said Orm in a low voice, more to himself, while flexing his fingers like an athlete preparing for an important match. This time, the challenge before him is to cook typical Chinese egg pancakes. A simple dish but requires skill to get perfect results. The first step Orm took was to unwrap the flour and pour it into a large bowl. With quick and skillful movements, he cracked the egg and added it to the mixture. Ling has just finished his exercise routine. Sweat trickled down his forehead, and without thinking, he grabbed a small towel to wipe the sweat that dripped down his face and neck. After that, his gaze turned to the wall clock, which showed 8 o'clock in the morning. He decided to end his gym session and get ready to enjoy the day. Ling came out of the gym at home, walked slowly down the hall towards the main room. As he got closer to the kitchen, he heard a noise coming from that direction. Ling smiled slightly, feeling like he already knew who was in the kitchen. Without hesitation, he stepped inside and stopped in the doorway. "Good morning, Norm," Ling said in a warm tone, seeing a familiar figure busy at the kitchen table. "Good morning, Peeling," Orm replied, glancing briefly at Ling with a smile on his lips. His hands continued to move nimbly, preparing something on the stove. Ling approached, a little curious about what Orm was cooking. "What are you cooking?" he asked while glancing at the ingredients lined up on the kitchen table. "Egg pancakes, Phi. Is that okay?" Orm asked, his eyes briefly looking at Ling, who was known to be quite selective about food. Ling chuckled at the concern. "I like whatever you cook, Nong. Don't worry," he answered lightly. Even though he is the picky type, every Orm dish can always satisfy him. Orm smiled in relief. "I'm making Chinese egg pancakes. They might not taste as authentic as the real thing, but I'll make sure they're still delicious." "Let me show you," answered Ling. He then took a knife and began to demonstrate the correct way to cut. His movements were fast, making Orm try to follow carefully. "Like this, Phi?" asked Orm, who felt a little difficult with the technique being taught. "Yes, in China they usually cut meat like this," Ling answered. Ling moved closer to correct the position of Orm's hand. Calmly, he held Orm's hand, directing the correct way to cut. Body, Orm felt stiff. When Ling stood so close to him, as if hugging him from the side, Orm's heart beat faster. "Do you understand, Nong?" Ling asked, his face so close to Orm's that it made him even more nervous. Orm turned his head, and their faces were very close. He felt his heart beating faster. "Yes, Phi," he answered quickly, then pulled his body slightly away, trying to control his feelings. Ling smiled with satisfaction. "Okay, then," he said, then went back to busy with his work. Even though he looked relaxed, Ling felt the same way. His heart was beating fast, and he found it difficult to look away from Orm's face. Even though he tried to remain calm, there was something that made it increasingly difficult to pretend to be normal whenever he was around Orm. "Oh yes, Phi. After this I have permission to go to campus for a while before taking Phi to work," said Orm as he tidied up his cooking utensils that he had just finished using. Ling, who was enjoying his breakfast, looked at Orm and immediately responded, "I'm coming with you." Orm, who didn't expect that answer, stopped what he was doing and turned to Ling with furrowed brows. "So what, Phi?" Ling calmly swallowed her food before answering, "I'm coming to your campus, so we can go straight to work after. You don't have to come back and forth just to pick me up." However, Orm seemed doubtful, but before Orm could finish his sentence, Ling immediately interrupted. "There's no but. You better save your time and energy to accompany me to work today." Orm took a deep breath, then nodded in agreement. "Okay, Phi," he answered in a resigned tone, even though there was still a little doubt in his heart about bringing Ling to campus. Peeling, Wait here a moment, okay? Orm said, looking at Ling, who was sitting next to him. Ling nodded slowly, smiling slightly in response to Orm's request. Okay, Nong? He answered softly, not wanting to disturb Orm's busy life. I just need to hand in the assignment. It won't take long, really, Orm added, as if trying to convince Ling that he wouldn't leave him for too long. After that, Orm opened the car door and got off quickly, leaving Ling still sitting in the passenger seat. Ling took a deep breath, then let out a slow sigh. His eyes turned to the cell phone in his hand. He tried to divert his attention by opening several applications, but his mind was not completely focused. Occasionally, his gaze drifted out the car window. The atmosphere around campus felt a little foreign to him. It's been a long time, Ling muttered to himself. He just realized how much he missed the days when he was still actively studying on campus. While continuing to wait for Orm, Ling lost himself in reverie, remembering how he and his friends used to spend time together, joking around between lectures. Now, busy work and daily routines seemed to distance him from those moments. Ling busied herself with her cell phone again, her fingers nimbly exploring the screen while occasionally smiling idly. In the middle of the scrolling screen, a film trailer caught his attention. The small smile on his face grew bigger. This looks like a good film. I want to take Norm to see it today, Ling muttered quietly to himself. However, when Ling turned his gaze out of the window to look at the surrounding situation, the smile on his face slowly faded. His eyes narrowed, focusing on Orm's figure, who had just come out of the building. Orm wasn't alone. He was walking hand in hand with a man, and there was something in the way they interacted that made Ling feel uncomfortable. Their gestures looked so close, so intimate. The man seemed to speak while smiling at Orm, and Orm returned the same smile. Ling felt something strange rippling in his heart. It was as if an unknown feeling had suddenly crept in, making his chest feel tight. For a moment, he could only remain silent, his eyes continuing to follow the steps of the two of them. Who is that guy? Ling asked himself, a question that was now filling his mind. After handing in his assignment, Orm walked quickly towards the car. With light steps, he opened the door and went inside. Shortly after, sitting down, he turned to Ling, who was still engrossed in his cell phone. Did peeling wait long? Orm asked, a small smile on his face, his tone light. Although there was concern that Ling might get bored of waiting, Ling turned his head, smiling faintly. Not really, Norm, he answered softly. Don't want to make Orm feel guilty for the time spent alone. Okay, let's go, said Orm in a happier spirit than before. He started the car engine, the sound of the engine revving softly as the car started to move, slowly leaving the campus area, which was getting further and further behind them. Throughout the journey, the atmosphere in the car felt a little different from usual. They don't talk much, even though they usually always have conversations flowing endlessly between the two. Orm focused more on the road ahead, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror and checking the traffic. However, in between silences, he still tried to strike up small conversations, telling trivial things he encountered or thought about. On the other hand, Ling just smiled while listening, occasionally looking at his cell phone screen. Even though he rarely comments on Orm's stories, he still pays attention to every word he says, occasionally giving short responses. Now Orm, Ling suddenly called. Yes, peeling, Orm answered, his eyes still focused on the road, but his tone showed he was ready to listen to whatever Ling had to say. What time does work finish today? Ling asked, his voice soft but a little hesitant. Afternoon. 5. Today is just shooting for the pilot trailer for the new series, so it should be quick, answered Orm while glancing briefly at Ling, making sure he didn't lose focus while driving. Ling bit her lip for a moment, appearing to think before speaking again. Today there's a good horror film being shown. I want to take you to see it. Finally he dared to express his wish. His eyes stared straight at Orm, waiting for a response. Horror movies? Orm asked, one eyebrow raised. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Why does it have to be a horror film, Fi? Because he said the film was good, so I wanted to watch it. Ling answered casually, but still looked at Orm expectantly. Why are you afraid of horror movies? Orm was silent for a moment, looking like he was thinking about his answer. He muttered, seeming hesitant before finally saying, I'm not afraid. Fi, after all, it's just a movie, and the ghosts are people too, right? Why be afraid? Ling chuckled at Orm's answer. Okay, then after work let's go watch the movies. Orm just nodded, even though he was hiding doubts. He wasn't a fan of horror films, but he didn't want to disappoint Ling. It was 6 in the afternoon when Ling and Orm finally arrived at Siam Paragon Mall, the place Ling had chosen to watch a movie with Orm. The atmosphere in the mall that afternoon was busy, but not too crowded. The two of them walked side by side, their steps leisurely through the elegant mall halls towards the cinema on the 3rd floor. Upon arrival at the cinema, Ling immediately ordered tickets for 2 people, without asking many questions because he already knew what film he wanted to watch. After that, the two of them stepped into line at the snack counter. What do you want to order, Nong? Ling asked while glancing at Orm, trying to make sure Orm also got what he wanted. Orm stared at the menu board above the counter for a moment before answering. Popcorn and maybe a soda, Fi. In that case, okay. Ling nodded, then ordered a large popcorn and 2 soda drinks when it was their turn. When their order was ready, Ling seemed to have a little difficulty carrying everything. Seeing this, Orm immediately offered help. Let me help you, Fi, he said in a gentle tone. Ling smiled and handed a bucket of popcorn and a drink into Orm's hands. Bring this one, he said, while he himself brought another drink and some additional snacks. The two of them then walked towards the theater waiting room, deciding to sit down while waiting for the cinema doors to open. Orm occasionally glanced around, observing the other visitors who were also waiting. Meanwhile, Ling seemed to be enjoying the ice cream he had ordered. Nong, do you want some? Ling asked suddenly, raising a small spoon filled with ice cream towards Orm. Orm shook his head slowly with a smile. No, Fi, I don't really like ice cream, he answered politely. Oh yeah, but you have to try this one. It tastes really good, Ling said in a teasing tone. Without waiting for an answer, he scooped the ice cream onto his spoon and aimed it in front of Orm's mouth. Hey, he joked, hoping Orm wouldn't refuse. Orm hesitated for a moment, looking at Ling, who smiled gently while waiting for her reaction. Finally, Orm opened his mouth and ate the ice cream he was given. Occasionally he glanced around, making sure that no one was paying too much attention to them. How it's delicious, right? Ling asked, looking at Orm expectantly as if waiting for praise. Orm gave a small nod. It feels good, Fi, he replied, followed by a thin smile that was rarely seen on his face. Seeing Orm's positive response, Ling enthusiastically said, Then I will feed you again. He immediately spooned out more ice cream for himself, then offered Orm the spoon containing the ice cream again. Orm smiled again, and this time without hesitation. He took a bite of the ice cream that Ling gave him. However, the moment the spoon entered his mouth, an idle thought crossed his mind. His eyes stared at Ling for a moment before he looked down again. If you eat one spoonful together, can this be called an indirect kiss? He muttered to himself, feeling a little embarrassed by the thought. Nong, uncle. Nong, Orm. Orm snapped out of his thoughts when he heard Ling's voice calling him. He immediately turned to Ling, who was sitting beside him. What's wrong, Peeling? He asked in a low voice, The theater doors have opened. Are you okay? Ling asked softly, implying concern because he had noticed Orm looking lost in thought. I'm fine. Orm smiled faintly, then stood up carrying a bowl of popcorn and a drink. Let's go in now, Fi, he said. They walked side by side towards the cinema door, then walked to their reserved seats. The atmosphere in the cinema was quite busy, but the sound of people chatting quietly soon disappeared when the lights started to dim and the film started playing. When the film started, Ling looked seriously, listening to every scene. There isn't any signs of fear on his face, even though the film they were watching was a horror film. However, every now and then he glanced at Orm, who apparently wasn't as calm as he was. Orm looked restless, even covering his own eyes with his hands when the scary scene appeared. You said you wouldn't be afraid, Ling whispered, smiling amusedly at Orm's reaction. The film turned out to be scarier than I expected, Orm answered in a slightly embarrassed tone, still trying to cover up his fear. Occasionally, he opened his eyes slightly, but closed them quickly again when a horror scene appeared on the screen. Ling smiled gently, then caringly embraced Orm's head and placed it on his shoulder. If you're scared, you can hide on my shoulder, he said quietly. Orm responded with a small nod, although his cheeks were starting to turn red. Every time a scary scene appeared on the screen, Orm actually leaned his head on his shoulder. Ling chuckled softly, finding it funny to see Orm, who was actually braver in his daily life, but this time seemed so fragile. 2 hours have passed, and finally the Death Whisper film that Ling and Orm were watching ended. As the studio lights slowly turned on, Ling turned her head to the side and smiled slightly when she saw Orm asleep with his head resting on her shoulder. Orm's face looked peaceful, slightly folded by the pile of hair that covered part of his face. Gently, Ling brushed the hair away, making sure not to disturb Orm's sleeping face. The gentle touch on his face made Orm blink, trying to come back to consciousness. He looked around with his eyes still half closed, and in an instant he realized that he was still in the cinema. Oh my, did the film finish earlier? Fi, Orm asked, panicked when he realized that many people had stood up and started leaving the cinema studio. Ling smiled slightly and nodded. Yeah, the movie just finished. I wanted to wake you up, but you woke up yourself, he answered calmly. Orm, who still felt a little confused, immediately rubbed his face, trying to fully wake himself up from the drowsiness that stuck to him. He even patted his cheek gently to ward off the remaining drowsiness. After feeling fresher, he turned to Ling. So, shall we go home now? Or does Peeling want to go somewhere else first? Let's just go straight home, Ling answered briefly, then stood up from his seat. Naturally, he took Orm's hand and led him out of the cinema. Orm, who felt awkward, tried to let go of Ling's hand. Since earlier, he felt several pairs of eyes staring at the two of them, perhaps because they seemed so close together. However, instead of letting go, Ling tightened his grip even more, as if he didn't care about the gazes of the people around them. They walked hand in hand towards the parking lot, Ling's hand still holding Orm's hand firmly. Arriving at the parking lot, Ling stopped in his tracks and looked at Orm seriously. Let me drive. I won't let you drive, Sleepy, he said in a firm tone. But Orm tried to protest, feeling that he could still control the car even though he was a little tired. No buts, Ling interrupted quickly. Driving Sleepy is dangerous. You know that, right? I don't want to take any chances, he continued, holding out his hand. Asking for the car keys from Orm. Orm was silent for a moment, but finally complied. Without saying much, he handed the car keys to Ling. He knew Ling was right, and it would be better for Ling to drive. After getting the keys, Ling opened the car door for Orm politely. Please come in, he said with a faint smile. "Thank you, Peeling," Orm replied with a small smile. Before he finally got into the car, his heart felt warm seeing the attention Ling gave him. Ling closed the car door gently after Orm sat comfortably, then walked around to the driver's side. Deftly, he started the car engine, and they drove home, leaving the cinema parking lot. Throughout the journey, Ling, who was focused on driving, occasionally glanced at Orm. There was something different when he was with Orm, even though Ling is a celebrity who is often in the public eye. When she is with Orm, she feels free. Their togetherness made Ling forget of the camera or the spotlight of the people around him. With Orm, Ling felt comfortable, as if her world was only focused on being with Orm.